Hello students, we wanted to look at some of the basics of biblical interpretation. I know some of you this is not necessary, but there's all levels and backgrounds in the class. Some are pastors and some are engineers, so it just depends. But we want to look at some basic definitions just to lay a foundation. How to read and follow the flow of thought in a passage, very important for this class. We want to look at a strategy and a methodology later on, but right now we're just defining some terms and what they mean. So what is hermeneutics? It's the art and science of interpreting the scripture. All kinds of influences on the science part of it, and that's dealing with the different genres and the reading contracts for each genre. The gospel genre has one reading contract, the epistolatory, the history part of in Acts, the apocalyptic and Revelation, they all have different reading contracts that they expect a person to understand how that literature works. So the science part of it is understanding what those kinds of reading contracts are. But then the art part of it is how to skillfully take that knowledge and look at the text and see what meanings are there based on that background. And so the first thing we want to look at is the world of the world of the New Testament. That's the Bible itself. And so let's just look back here. We're talking about that world and our world, and the big difference, the cultural, historical differences, the linguistic differences, of course the geography. We're over here, most of us in North America. That's an ancient Near Eastern culture that had a lot of features to it that were very strange to us. So the world of the Bible, and looking at that world of the Bible and trying to bring the meaning there into our day with some kind of application. That's the whole process of hermeneutics. So what is exegesis then? It is basically looking at what it meant to the original author and what it meant to the original audience. And that is called exegesis. The part of it is the reading out of the text. Instead of eisegesis, the opposite is reading into the text. In other words, taking our culture and our worldviews and reading it into that of the ancient worldview, the world of the first century in the New Testament, and overlaying what we think is normal into that day, and judging what was normal back then by our day. And so that's the normative back then is totally different in every area, and that's why we take so much time in the first unit to look at the backgrounds. And that gets into the context then. There is a sitz in Laban, that is the situation in life, the historical, cultural aspects of both the Jewish world and the Greco-Roman world. We need to take that into account. And each passage will have specific things. There's an IVP dictionary on Bible backgrounds edited by Craig Kinger, and Dr. Kinger does a great job of explaining in a particular passage any backgrounds that have that impact the meaning in a particular passage. So context is a historical cultural context, getting back into the situation in life of that day and time. Again, looking at it from their perspective. Then there's the literary context, that is what's before the passage you're dealing with and what comes after the passage. All of those impact the meaning, and there's different levels for this, and we're going to get into the next lecture, looking at it at the paragraph level, the sentence, the paragraph, and the discourse level. And we're going to look at literary context in some of those, in some illustrations of it from different passages in the New Testament, just to demonstrate how context colors the meaning. Of course, any text without a context is a pretext, right? Exegetical purpose of the passage. Was a question we need to ask. What would be missing if this passage was not in the Bible? So there's the broad story of the New Testament as the fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecies about the promised redemption of God's people. And so we need to think about a passage of Scripture and ask ourselves that in that broad overall story of the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, if this particular passage wasn't in the Bible, what would be missing? And so you have to understand, first of all, that broad overview, understanding that God's original purpose is his final purpose for humanity, that his presence among his people in his place. That was his original design. God designed a place for his people that he created in his image to be with him. And when we look at the book of Revelation, that is fulfilled with the new heavens and the new earth, where the Lamb is the light, and we are there in his presence, and that in the new heaven and new earth, his place. So that has always been God's purposes. And we can follow that redemptive story and ask ourselves the question, what would be missing in that story if this passage wasn't here? And then the idea of application, we will look at how to principletize the passage and apply those principles to our lives. Part of that understanding the principle is understanding the flow of thought in a passage. So we have to look at what the author is saying is the main key center or key idea of a passage. Look at how that is supported by all the various elements in the passage, and then put together the flow of thought for that entire passage or pericope if you're in the Gospels. So once again, once you get that principle, it'll be something similar from that was in the passage with what's going on in our day. In other words, there's similarities between the Old Testament world, the New Testament world, and our world. That, for example, when God promises his people that he will deliver them, that's a promise to his people in a certain circumstance in the Old Testament, but that is fulfilled in the New Testament with the coming of Jesus, the deliverer who delivers people from demon possession and from sickness and provides redemption and healing. And that is also that is also something that we can claim. Then it's a similarity. We're God's people. We're in a situation where we need deliverance, and so that principle can be applied to us in our situation today, whatever that particular for our lives might be. So the art and science of interpreting Scripture, just a broad overview of the basics, and so the next activity will be just, do you know these basics?